In the ancient lands of Judea, a young boy named Jesus is living with his family in Nazareth. The Bible tells us he was born in a manger and visited by wise men. And we know about his teachings and crucifixion as an adult. But between the ages of 12 and 30, the historical record goes silent. These are often called the lost years of Jesus. The last time we see him in the Bible as a child, he's 12 years old. He travels to Jerusalem with his parents, Mary and Joseph, for the Passover festival. When it's time to leave, his parents assume he's with other relatives in their caravan. After a full day of travel, they realize he's missing. They rush back to Jerusalem in a panic, searching everywhere for their son. For 3 days, they look for him without any success. Finally, they find him in the temple courts. He's sitting among the religious teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who hears him is amazed at his understanding and his answers. When Mary confronts him, asking why he caused them so much worry, Jesus replies with a question of his own. He asks why they were searching for him, saying, "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" His parents don't understand what he means by this. After this event, the Gospels simply state that he went back to Nazareth with them and was obedient. And then, there's nothing. For the next 18 years, the Bible offers no details about his life. The next time Jesus appears in the narrative, he is a grown man around the age of 30, coming to the Jordan River to be baptized by his cousin, John the Baptist. This long period of silence has puzzled theologians and historians for centuries. It has become a fertile ground for speculation, theories, and even some extraordinary claims about what Jesus might have been doing during this time. The most widely accepted view among mainstream Christian scholars is that Jesus lived a quiet, ordinary life in Nazareth. He likely followed in his father's footsteps, working as a carpenter or a stonemason. The Greek word used in the Gospels, tekton, can refer to a craftsman who works with various materials, not just wood. He would have lived with his family, which included his parents and several brothers and sisters mentioned in the Gospels. He would have attended the local synagogue, studying the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, and the writings of the prophets. This period would have been a time of quiet growth and preparation. It was a time for him to mature physically, intellectually, and spiritually. He would have been deeply immersed in his Jewish faith and culture, observing the traditions and festivals. This simple explanation suggests there was nothing sensational to report. His life was that of a typical Galilean man of his time, and the Gospel writers chose to focus on his public ministry, which was the most significant part of his life for their theological message. They were not writing a detailed biography in the modern sense. Instead, they were creating a theological account of his life, death, and resurrection. So, the lost years were not lost to God or to Jesus himself. They were simply the private years before his public mission began. This view emphasizes his humanity and his connection to his community, showing that he lived a real, relatable human life before beginning the work that would change the world. However, the lack of information has opened the door to many other, more elaborate theories. One of the most popular and enduring legends is that Jesus traveled to the east. Some proponents of this idea suggest he journeyed to India, Nepal, and Tibet. According to these theories, he went there to study with Hindu gurus and Buddhist monks. This idea first gained popularity in the 19th century with the publication of a book by a Russian journalist named Nicholas Notovich. He claimed that while recovering from an injury in a monastery in Ladakh, he was shown ancient texts that described the life of a saint named Isa. This Isa, he was told, was actually Jesus. The texts supposedly detailed his travels through India and his studies of the Vedas and Buddhist sutras. According to this account, Jesus spent his formative years learning about reincarnation, karma, and other Eastern spiritual concepts. He then returned to Judea to share these enlightened teachings with his own people. While this story has captured the imagination of many, scholars have widely discredited Notovich's claims. Many have pointed out inconsistencies in his story, and the monastery he mentioned has denied ever possessing such manuscripts or even having met him. Despite the lack of credible evidence, the idea of Jesus in India persists. It offers a tantalizing link between Eastern and Western spirituality, suggesting a universal truth that connects different faiths. For some, it explains the profound wisdom of his teachings by attributing them to the ancient philosophies of the East. Another fascinating theory places the young Jesus in Britain. This legend is connected to another biblical figure, Joseph of Arimathea. He was the wealthy man who, according to the Gospels, donated his own tomb for Jesus' burial after the crucifixion. Later legends, particularly those that became popular in medieval England, suggested that Joseph was a relative of Jesus, perhaps his great-uncle. And as a wealthy merchant, he was said to be involved in the tin trade, which would have brought him to the shores of Britain. The story goes that on one of these voyages, he brought his young nephew, Jesus, with him. They are said to have landed in Cornwall and traveled to a place that would later be known as Glastonbury. This legend is the inspiration for the famous poem, "And Did Those Feet in Ancient Time," which was later set to music as the hymn Jerusalem. The poem asks if Jesus' feet once walked upon England's green and pleasant land. The Glastonbury thorn, a type of hawthorn tree that flowers twice a year, is said to have miraculously sprouted from Joseph of Arimathea's staff. While this story is a beloved part of English folklore, there is no historical or archaeological evidence to support it. Like the stories of Jesus in India, it seems to be a product of a later time, created to give a location a special connection to the history of Christianity. It was a way for early British Christians to claim a direct link to Jesus himself, making their land a holy land in its own right. Other theories suggest that Jesus spent his silent years closer to home, but still outside of Nazareth. One idea is that he joined a spiritual community known as the Essenes. The Essenes were a Jewish mystical sect that lived in monastic communities in the desert. They are most famous for being the likely authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were discovered in caves near Qumran in the 20th century. The Essenes practiced a strict, ascetic lifestyle. They were known for their ritual bathing, communal meals, and intense study of the scriptures. They were also focused on apocalyptic prophecies and awaited the coming of a Messiah. Some scholars have pointed out similarities between the teachings of Jesus and the beliefs found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Both emphasize righteousness, truth, and a spiritual interpretation of the law. This has led some to speculate that Jesus may have lived among the Essenes at Qumran for a time, learning from them before beginning his own ministry. Perhaps John the Baptist, who operated in the same desert wilderness, had connections to this community and introduced Jesus to them. However, there are also significant differences. Jesus' ministry was very public, and he associated freely with all kinds of people, including those considered sinners, which was contrary to the Essenes' exclusive and isolated nature. So while he may have been influenced by their ideas, it's unlikely he was a formal member of their group. The Gospels themselves never mention the Essenes by name, making any connection purely speculative. In the end, the 18 lost years of Jesus remain a mystery. The Gospels do not provide a day-by-day account of his life. They are faith documents, written to proclaim a message about who Jesus was and what he did for humanity. The writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, selected the events and teachings that were most important for that message. For them, the story truly began with his baptism and the start of his public ministry. Everything before that was simply prelude. The silence in the scriptural record doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus was on a grand adventure in a faraway land. It's more likely that he was living a life that was, on the surface, unremarkable. He was a craftsman in a small town, a son, a brother, and a faithful Jew. He was learning and growing, preparing in quiet obscurity for the moment when he would step onto the public stage and begin a ministry that would forever alter the course of human history. The theories about his travels to India or Britain, or his time with the Essenes, are intriguing. They speak to our desire to fill in the gaps and to know every detail about this monumental figure. But without any historical proof, they remain just that, theories and legends. The truth of the lost years might be that there is no sensational secret to uncover. The most profound truth might be that Jesus lived a normal human life, sharing in the common experiences of work, family, and community before he began his extraordinary mission. And perhaps this quiet, unrecorded period of his life is just as important as the one that was. Hey,